And football is in our rearview mirror, but we will continue to discuss it. I am Doug Kazarian alongside Analytics Capper, much more conventional talk back as I was at Radio Row in New Orleans last week ahead of the Super Bowl for our last session a Thursday ago.
Yeah, the goal, right, is to have DCTV at Media Row next year at the Super Bowl. That's
There you
the
go.
that's the goal with the two of us frontlining that or headlining that. That'd be really fun. But how was your experience overall? I know you've done several of them. What was the biggest takeaway for you from the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it last week. So I've been to seven, I counted, all in different cities, which is kind of funny. But I will say the gambling phenomenon, the novelty that is Super Bowl props and stuff has waned, right? When I first started going to them, I was with ESPN bringing packets and saying, guys, look at all these prop bets. It was the hall pass that media outlets could discuss betting for that 1 week. Then legalization happened, and then things along those lines. And everyone is so sort of desensitized to the novelty of it, which I think is a win. I think that's a good thing. We're all sort of accustomed to doing betting discussions every day, right? There's props every day. There's all this stuff. So, when my first radio hits, I got on and joined a station when they immediately asked me about the over under for props, for punts, excuse me. And I was like, oh, come on. But back in, a few years ago, that was never the case. I had to teach them about the crazy props, how there might be value and things along those lines. So, the novelty's worn off, which I think is good for everyone. But it was still fun being out there. It's almost Woodstock for media members. You get to see all your old cronies and stuff like that, and a lot of former coworkers are mine. So it was cool. And I was there Monday to Thursday. It was good to get back, beat the rush, if you will, because you don't need to be there more than 4 days at least. When I was there, just doing it. But being there the whole week is not the end of the world either.
Yeah, so it was in New Orleans. I'm sure that was fun just because the city overall is fun. It's kind of like a miniature Vegas with a casino right there as well. Were there, added security, anything like that, just because of what happened during during college football playoffs?
Absolutely, there was basically like National Guard type security. So the
Wow.
regular cops were there, but when you expect huge crowds, you bring in more security from other cities. And I was talking to a few of them. A couple people were from St. Louis, and there was a vigil on Canal and Bourbon Street where the fatalities happened on New Year's Eve. And the city is still sort of coming to grips with it and dealing with it. It's only been a month and a half, and I will say the added security just made you feel much more comfortable. Anyone who's been to Cabo kind of gets that feeling with jeeps and a lot of military presence, and you're just used to like hanging out and drinking in the street. It's there for your security, not to invade your space or anything like that. So, but again, I left on Thursday late afternoon, so I don't know how crazy it was over the weekend. Like Monday and Tuesday were relatively dead on Bourbon. Um, but the city as a whole is very welcoming, very chill. They love events. So it's very conducive to these types of events. But look, it was a lot of fun. The game was not though. I just remember a buddy of mine from my childhood visited, and I just looked at him like, dude, this is like when we were kids, man. All these blowouts. The
Yeah.
game was over early.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the game in a little bit. I do have one more question regarding just the venue in general. So you went back to Vegas on Thursday. There's been, conflicting reports about Vegas on Super Bowl weekend. Did you see, an uptick of activity? How was Vegas during Super Bowl weekend?
So it's a great point, and there's been various outlets reporting that. I mean, my buddy who came in town said he saw very cheap rates, and that's not usually the case. Now, some of it is a hangover effect, the fact that the game was here last year, but also the novelty. For the most part, the last couple decades, betting was never a catalyst to Vegas tourism. It's usually the party scene or restaurants or conventions a couple times a year, whether it's Super Bowl and March Madness, sports was a catalyst for tourism. Obviously, Super Bowl weekend, but I think there's been some pushback, whether it be resorts fees, parking. You no longer feel like you're getting a deal,
Mhm.
and the glad handing and the comps. Now it's a lot of P&L sheets sort of dominating from a corporate structure. At least that's the perception. And the Vegas sort of allure is minimized when people can go play poker, an hour away from where they live, or
Yeah.
go to a riverboat, or go to a casino on an Indian reservation, or bet legally in 40 states. So some of what Vegas attracts now, there's still great weather most of the year. There's still great restaurants. It's a fun city, all that good stuff. But, we're not quite in a recession, but dollars matter. And sometimes there's going to be a tipping point or an inflection point, and maybe we've gotten there as a city, but we'll see. Like Vegas tends to rebound. It's great at putting on events and conventions and all that good stuff. Right now, I think the Magic Convention's going on right now, which is actually an acronym for fashion. It's not actually like magicians running around, but I do think there's a little bit of a dose of reality. Maybe some people make it in the pulling the strings in that regard. Do maybe have to kind of take notice and take inventory.
Yeah, for me personally, living in one of the states that is not legal to bet, right, to gamble, sports gamble, Vegas to me is still the pinnacle when it comes to events and things like that. I mean, I don't want to date myself, but when I was in college, Super Bowl weekend was a Vegas weekend trip every single year, all 4 years, and very, very memorable, amazing times there. But yeah, let's get to the game here. So last week we talked about how, you had a lot of professional friends, a lot of respectful money on the Eagles, and you were leaning that way. I was leaning Kansas City, but by Sunday I flipped it. I know you get my plays, and I'm sure you saw it as well. I was on
Yeah.
Eagles first half and Eagles full game, so it was a great game for me from a betting perspective. I didn't even get to watch much of the game. It was kind of boring for the most part. The pick at the end of the first half kind of hurt my under, so that was an L. But now what was your biggest takeaway when it comes to Eagles Kansas City?
Well, I'm still bitter over the bad field from 2 years ago when they met in the Super Bowl, because I was on the Eagles. I liked them at least, and I was on a bunch of unders and a bunch of props, and I feel like that game screwed everything up for me. I put in so much work. I was really locked in terms of the props. I actually, it was my last Super Bowl column for ESPN, and I wrote on the homepage, I don't have a pick on the game, but here I have a bunch of props. And it just went haywire with all the fields. So I was
Yeah,
annoyed because my thing was, I think the pass rush is going to get to Mahomes, like we saw the Bucks Super Bowl, and I felt, just Hurts and all those guys could dominate in the trenches, and that's basically what happened, right? They shut down Saquon. His under was actually one of the only props I got right, but I I just think the Eagles were the better team, and their best is. But I also think Mahomes just played poorly, right? So the pick where he got knocked off balance and the Bond interception, fine, that happens, pressure. But we said it last week. If you can get pressure with your front four, because we talked about it with the NFC Championship game, Jaden Daniels, awesome against the blitz. They didn't blitz him. They could get pressure on him without having to blitz, and then you got seven in coverage. But the throw to Hopkins was just way off. So
yeah,
Mahomes, in addition to getting pressured, he just had a bad game.
he had a
He
bad
was
game.
off on his throws. And maybe some of those errant throws are a byproduct of being knocked around a little bit. But look, they were never going to win the game. But I thought Mahomes just played poorly when the times he could have at least had a good throw. Whereas in that Buck Super Bowl, he was hobbled and still throwing pinpoint passes and hit
Hmm.
guys in the face mask, and still did not manage to throw a touchdown pass in that game. But Mahomes played poorly. I thought the Chiefs lacked fight, and I was actually kind of worried about that. You get these teams get so confident, right? Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs in that Bucks Super Bowl loss, they were overconfident, and he said it. And they faced each other the following regular season, and the Chiefs won that game. And he said, "Yeah, we weren't going to mess around this time." I think there was a coronation. I think the three-peat reports and all that. Um, we talk about it all the time. When teams play like they're expected to win, they don't play well. Look at the Lakers last night. They smoked the Jazz on Monday, and go get smoked wire to wire the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts. One, you're absolutely right. I think Mahomes didn't play up to not only his standard, but a Super Bowl winning quarterback standard, right? Because Mahomes is above that. We'll get into the narrative about Mahomes and the GOAT discussion and Brady and all that in a little bit. But one thing I wanted to get into is, you know, they had built this entire season winning on one possession games, and that means they were really, really dependent on that defense. And I know Mahomes played poorly, and I know there was a pick six and a pick in their own zone. But to me, their defense did not show up at all. Like Philly
Right.
was able to get exactly what they wanted. We knew Jalen Hurts was going to tuck it and run a lot more often early, right? And he did. He was able to find creases there. And yes, they were able to shut Saquon down for the most part, but that team is loaded. That team is stacked with so many great weapons on the outside. I don't know. It just looked like Kansas City was overmatched. So my question to you is, do you think it would have been a better game if it was Buffalo, Philadelphia?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's I know the answer to one of the questions. I mean, I know the one outcome was not a good game, so it's hard not to think it would have been a better game. But I also think there would have been more excitement. I think there was fatigue with the Chiefs. We talked about it. No one. We were just kind of played out. The season just drags out anyway with this how deep it goes now. We talked about it with the college football championship game. I know a lot of like diehard sports fans, big bettors who were like, "Yeah, I'm ready for the season to end." So there's just a lengthening of the season that feels long, and also just a saturation of discussion around, with the 24-hour sort of information cycle and social media and everything. I just think there's only so many hot takes you can have on a game when you're talking about it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So just having new blood there would be helpful. The Bills
It,
being an exciting team, that franchise, just never having won it all would be fun.
it's going to be really a big mental fatigue if and when there's a trilogy, Eagles, Kansas City trilogy in the next couple years. But let's get to Mahomes. So a lot of people are already taking him out of the GOAT discussion, and they can argue both sides, but in my opinion, Mahomes is still 29. He still has,
Right.
10 more years at least of this great production. He didn't have a good year and he was still able to make the Super Bowl. Do you think the discussion between him and Brady are warranted, or shouldn't the discussion shouldn't even happen yet? Is it still too early?
So I typically hate this stuff, but I will amuse you and participate because I like my whole thing is fundamentally you can't have it both ways. You can't have football being the ultimate team game and then great quarterbacks based on these types of things. I think win loss records for quarterbacks really don't make a ton of sense at all. I think more statistics and final drives, all that stuff does matter more. I think let's not close the book on Mahomes just yet. He's 29. Just because he loses a Super Bowl and he's had a different left tackle and that whole O line against the Bucks was so beat up, he did play poorly, and Brady never played this poorly. And that's part of my reason. Brady's best game was when they lost to the Eagles, right? He had
Yeah.
500 passing yards. I mean, it's just so silly. Like the defense matters. And early on, when he got his rings, he was just a placeholder. He was a game manager, which is totally fine. He was a rookie. Um, so, obviously he did okay, but, did the Patriots have the Rams offensive play sheets or video and Spygate? And all? I mean, look, there's so many layers to this and so many nuances, but what Mahomes does is special. He's made all the plays. He's been the difference maker in 17 straight one-score games and everything. But this was a team letdown. This wasn't on Mahomes. He's front and center to blame for sure, but he wasn't the only one. And this team was not winning. I thought Andy Reid did not have his guys ready across the board, and you could say Mahomes as the team leader did not have his guys ready. But yeah, let's wait. Even like LeBron, like his career's not done. Like we've been trying to do this discussion for LeBron. He wins a title in the bubble and all this other stuff. So just pump the brakes, and that's why betting, thankfully, is entering sports talk radio. Can you imagine if we didn't have betting the last 6 years, and how much like exhaustion we would have on some of these talks, these goat debates and all this other? We would just be so overwhelmed. But now we at least have an entry point of betting content where we can discuss things in a non stupid hot take way.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're 17 minutes into the show. I just want to thank everybody that's jumped on and really, caught on to this show throughout the season. I get DMs all the time, Doug. I don't know about you, saying, hey, I love what you did on the show. I love some of those points that you made. And then I get it on the opposite side too. Like, those are some of the craziest takes and things like that.
Right.
I appreciate it. I appreciate all the feedback. And we're going to continue to do this throughout, the NBA season, hopefully into the NFL season next year as well. But for those who just want to try out our VIP plays or premium plays, check out the comments underneath this video. You'll see Doug's 3-day free trial as well as my 3-day free trial. So if you want to check it out, definitely sign up with DubClub, and you can get our plays for free for a few days. And it's a great time for me, Doug, because it's been really hot for me, as I hope you've been following and tailing from your side as well. So not only football, but basketball, hockey's been really good, and tennis is full on board when it comes to some of this stuff. So it's been amazing.
Good.